Guys, I have a huge special treat for you. Who I've talked about many, many times is here. She is my, no other word, she is my sister, not by blood. And she is just, but she's going to be mad at me for saying this, and she's actually over on the couch over there. So you'll hear her make comments. But she is just my light and my mentor. And I just, God, I'm not going to get into how God has put her in my life because it is completely serendipitous. There's no other word for it. So let's dive right in before I get really weird and gooey and gooey. Okay. So guys, we're gonna do Psalms 75 through 77. Yes, that's 3 Psalms. So I'm gonna work quickly. Also, my girlfriend and I gonna have a comfies and movie date in a second. So we got stuff to do. All right. So we're gonna start with Psalm 75. And Psalm 75 is, I'm just gonna give you, of course, the top. Psalm 75 is a song. I realized that sometimes when I say psalm and song, it sounds the same. So apparently I have to not be less southern. So it is a song of Asaph. And essentially, I love this. The message can really be summarized in verse 7. In verse 7, my Bible's in my lap today, so I don't know what y'all might be thinking I'm doing, but I'm not. All right. So, verse 75. Yeah, technical difficulties. She's just very important, which is why I love her. All right. So, I'm messing with her now. Psalm 75, verse 7 is, I put these on. But God is the judge, and it has an exclamation point after that. And exclamation points sadly are overused in texting and emails these days, but in the Bible are very rarely used. And so it's like my repeater verses. I think there's obviously significance to that. So, but God is judge, exclamation point. So emphatically they're proclaiming this. He puts down one and lifts up another. And what I have is a couple of notes here. And actually, these notes are from my favorite source, Bible-studies.org. You'll find it somewhere when this gets edited. Um, very mediocrely, admittedly. So we're going to see this, that it can kind of be broken down into 4 sections. First of all, it's thanksgiving for God's almighty and undeserved presence. It is the promise of God's judgment. And excuse me, the first one, his thanksgiving is verse 1. The promise of God's judgment is verse 2 through 5. Explanation of God's judgment is verse 6 through 8. And confidence in God's judgment is verse 9 through 10. A couple of things that I like here is the psalmist declares their unwavering belief, trust, and faith in the fact that despite, and this is huge for what all of us are going through today, despite the physical, moral, and spiritual turmoil throughout the earth and throughout my heart, throughout your heart, probably, Erica, through your heart, turmoil. But God never loses control. Praise God, He never loses control. I love that. And then I have something. This is a note. It was directly from Bible study, so always give credit where credit is due. Man's dreadful, fatal, and blasphemous. I added those adjectives in because that's how I feel. Man's dreadful, fatal, and blasphemous sin threatened to destroy the earth. And doesn't it now, beloveds? But Christ, the Son of God, saved the world from utter ruin 2020 years ago. And He will, and I added this part, and He will do so again. Right? And like, I have to say, I've shared this with you, I think, that right when COVID started, and it seemed like the world was, I don't know what was going on. I had no idea. And I haven't read Revelations. We're going to read it together after Psalms. I was too scared to. Still kind of scared. But it was, God spoke to me and just said, on my heart, I was just freaking out and I have panic attacks. And He just said to me on my heart, you do realize that from the beginning of time, I was going to send Jesus back. So that gives me such confidence and reminds me, He knows what He's doing. We don't know the recipe card, but boy, is it perfect. And boy, does He know what He's doing. And we just have to abide in that. And yes, it's hard. I struggled with it 2 minutes ago when we were talking about something like, But honestly, your emotions should never drive your thoughts and your feelings and your motives. Oh, yeah? I think I probably got that from a therapist. I've seen my share, girl. I've seen my share. Um, and I love this, all the present hopes and future peace and happiness of God, specifically to the sinful nature of human race, they only come fully from Jesus. We can't get our hope from other places because it's going to be dashed, right? And so the verses I want to talk about here is going to be verse 1. You know, I like my intro verses, and this has a little treat in it. So, verse 1, we give praise and thanks to you, O God. And here's a little repeater. I'm going to start. Let me start again. You'll see the repeater. We give praise and thanks to you, O God. We praise and give thanks. Again, probably need to be emphasis on that. Your wondrous works declare that your name, capital N, put a bookmark there, that your name is near, and they who invoke your name, capital N, rehearse your wonders. And I had a little footnote in my Bible, which I'm so grateful for, and it turned me to Deuteronomy 12:5, where essentially this is one of the first times it's introduced that when God's name is capitalized, that is his presence, right? How never knew that. Like, and actually, you'll see it's later in another psalm. I should have underlined it, but it says your name will be renowned throughout the earth. Well, that's a lowercase n because it's his actual name, Yahweh. It's going to be known throughout the earth. It's a name. But when we see name capitalized in the Bible, it means his presence. So let me read that instead of saying name, I'll say presence and see if your heart moves a little bit. Your wondrous works declare that your presence is near. And they who invoke your presence rehearse your wonders. Oh, that's just, yeah. All right. Verse 3, and I'm going to read to you from my Amplified Bible, and then I've got a couple of different translations because I like to do that. Am I doing it right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm just making sure I got that. Okay. When the earth totters, Totters, sounds very English, don't you think? When the earth totters, and all the inhabitants of it, it is I, speaking now of God, so it's like God speaking. It is I who will poise and keep steady its pillars. In my easy to read version, because y'all know I'm simple, I like that version. The earth and all its people will shake, but I am the one who keeps it. Ugh! And then a little note I had here is the Lord of everything is always in control. Always. Even when it seems that like everything is falling apart around us. And raising my hand right now, I don't know what the heck's going on. It's just cray cray. But God is great. And this one a note called him the judge ruler, who will never allow, and this is my favorite, God will never allow the wicked, evil powers of this world, the arrogant, to undermine his kingdom. And so, beloveds, when we see people, could be your boss, who has what seems like just the perfect life, a beautiful wife or husband, beautiful children, 2.5 children that just look beautiful, like Gerber babies, and a huge house and 10 boats. And you wonder, because you see their actions, that they are not godly. And I openly admit that I have envy. I'm like, God, like, I'm struggling financially right now for reasons, and he's completely going against you. And he seems to have a great life. But beloveds, we have to remember, and we heard this yesterday, the riches of this fallen world mean nothing. And I really believe that's why God calls the poor and needy. And beloveds, poor does not have to mean in money. My spirit is poor. And I don't know anything else, but I'm needy. I mean, and thank God for that. I was raised like, well, I want to be like, I'm independent. I don't need anybody. But I'm so grateful, and it took a long time to get here, but you can have this. only just ask God. He will give it. He wants to give it to you. You just have to get out of your own way. But I'm so just joyous to need him, right? Like I'm just, that's a huge shift for prideful vanity. I'm all about independence, Amy. I need him. I need him in everything. And what's so glorious is because Jesus died on the cross, we don't have to go to a temple, right? We don't have to go to the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem. He's in us. I just, oh my God, I finally understood what that meant this year, and I can't, like, oh, it's amazing. Okay, Psalm 67. I've got a really yummy surprise for you here. Psalm 67. We'll just go over. Thank you. Oh my God, that's why I need her because. Oh, God bless you. Okay, Psalm 76 is the song of Asaph, and it teaches that God is willing to use His great power for His people. And this is a pretty short one, but like I said, I have a really yummy, juicy thing. I hope you find it juicy as well. The end. So essentially, I love this from, again, Bible-studies.org. It can be divided into 3 sections, so to speak. Verse 1 and 3 is really a demonstration of God's nearness to his people. Verse 4 through 9 is an imagery or a section of God's deliverance of his people. And then verse 10 through 12 is God's majesty to his people. And beloveds, I'm going to read for you verses 1 through 2, and here's where the juicy part comes. Okay, 1 through 2. In Judah, God is known and renowned. And here's the lowercase name, so you have this. In Judah, God is known and renowned. His name, lowercase n, so speaking literally of his name, Yahweh, is highly praised and is great in Israel. Verse 2. In Jerusalem also is his tabernacle, and his dwelling place is in Zion. So, I'm struggling, booze. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought Zion was Jerusalem, and I don't. And I'm gonna be honest. I used to work in international travel, and I will openly and shamefully admit this. I don't know geography, so never learned the 50 states. I'm like, whatever those square states are out in the middle. I'm like, you got me. So here's something, and if you want these notes, I'll also give them to you. I like my blue stuff, but I really needed to study, and I had to read a couple of articles. One of them was actually from rabbis, which I was like intimidated. But Israel versus Judah versus Jerusalem versus Zion. Can we please just understand this? I needed it. So here's my point. So I'm going to read this. When King Solomon died, and remember, this is David's son who built the first temple in Jerusalem. So hang on to that, and I'll get even more deeper. 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel refused to submit to his son, and so they broke off. And this is where we see then 2 kingdoms of the Hebrews were formed: Israel in the north, right, and Judah in the south. Remember, Judah's just 2 tribes. The Israelites made the capital. People now living in the 10 tribes made their capital Samaria, or Samaria. Oh. And the Judeans kept Jerusalem as their capital. Now, they remained separated for over 200 years, right? And this is where you'll see in 722 BC, the Assyrians essentially defeated Israel. And here's what's interesting. I've heard this before, that there's something called the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And I really thought they just got lost. Like, they were like, where's my compass in the wilderness? And they were just dumb and got lost. Like I would have done. Kind of Blair Witch trial kind of thing, But not Blair Witch. Yeah, the Blair Witch trial. Anyway, I digress. Y'all know I just saw that. So why do I have analogies to that? The Bible is embarrassing. Assyrians defeated the kingdom of Israel, and it was the Assyrians that forced them out of Israel and made them scatter throughout the empire of Assyria. But here's the thing, that's not why they're lost. It was these 10 tribes that then eventually gave up their belief in God, gave up their God, and then assimilated into the Assyrians of Baal and weird people that you dance naked in front of. I'm just kidding. But they did weird stuff. I mean, they literally killed their firstborn. And that's why they're the 10 lost tribes. And I love that. And then Then in 1597, so Judah remained intact until about 200 years later. And actually, there was a lot of different fights, but I'm going to stick with the one that's big. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, it's just hard to say, Nebuchadnezzar defeated Judah, and about 10 years later, he actually conquered Jerusalem. Now, this is different because he only took the prominent citizens. I mean, he's a politician. He wants the rich Jewish people up in his city. So he took them and they came, but they were still going to remain together and they still remained reliant on God. And then you'll see that when was that? And 430, no, yeah, between 530 and 430 BC, Ezra, who was one of those, came back to Jerusalem and started rebuilding it. So, now let's go with Zion versus Jerusalem. So I think that was clear for me. And then what we now know as Israel, boundary wise, and still being fought over devastatingly, it is essentially Judah, what used to be when they were separated, Judah and Israel. So now the Israel we now know is what those two kingdoms were, which I was. Zion versus Jerusalem. I really needed help with this one, like hard. So most people assume that Zion, the city of David, and Jerusalem, which many people refer to as the Holy City, are interchangeable. And sometimes they might be in some Psalms and things. However, it is obvious throughout the Bible, and this is where it's obvious in Psalm 76, verse 2, where it says, again, in Jerusalem also is his tabernacle, and his dwelling place is in Zion. So it's obviously two different places, right? So one of the Zion is in fact within the boundaries and was within the boundaries of Jerusalem. And actually, it's cited in 2 Samuel 87 that there's a wall constructed around Zion. And when the walls of Jerusalem were built, they expanded to include Zion. So it's almost like a city within a city. Right? Like, this is huge for me. Even Psalm 133:1 specifically stated that the holy city is made up of two cities joined together, Jerusalem and Zion. I got an example in the notes I was reading, some of the notes I was reading today, that it's like Budapest, which in Hungary, if you don't know, the two cities, Buda and Pest, are divided by, just geographically, physically, by a big river. But it is now known as Budapest. And so if you go on one side of the river, it's Old Buda. Sounds kind of funny. And on the other side, I just see a really big fat man with no hair. But Old Buda. But on the other side is Old Pest, unfortunately. But it's two cities that make up one. And so I think that's a really good, like, today example that we can get our minds around. And then here's the final one that I was really confused about. Where was the temple? I thought the temple was built in Jerusalem. And then I was like, well, was it on Mount Zion? Well, this is so helpful for me. So the city of Jerusalem is encompasses of what they essentially like many, many hills. And it says mounts, but obviously they're not like a huge mountain. I mean, it's something that you can walk up daily. And there's three major ones that are throughout the Bible. One is Mount Zion, which is David, right? Just attribute that to David because that's where he went to the top and he prayed. And I think that's where he built, if I can remember, quote if I'm wrong, but that's where he made the tent to hold the Holy of Holies until the temple was built in Jerusalem. Then there's Mount Olives, which huge with Jesus, see that a lot. And then finally there's Mount Moriah, like Mariah Carey. No, I'm kidding, but that's I think how you pronounce it. Mount Moriah, which is actually where they built the first temple. I did not know that. It is, and that's why that one is called the Temple Mount. Right? Huge! Okay, I'm running my time. So we're going to round out right now with Psalm 77. This is the Psalm of Asaph, and it's actually a national lament psalm. It's known as that. But here's, Erica, this is just, oh my God, help me, Erica. We were just talking about this. It reveals the ultimate cure for a depressed spirit. Don't y'all want to know what that cure is? Because I've had drugs, I still do, and I've had so much. But here it is, plainly. And the cure is simply this: committing yourself to focusing only on God and what he has done in the past to comfort us to know that he's working right now and he's going to do it again in the future. And this is actually, verse 10 is just interesting. It's a dynamic shift. So verse 1 through 9 is very like, woe is me. They're complaining about God, and they actually ask rhetorical questions. For example, will the Lord cast, verse 7, will the Lord cast off forever, and will he be favorable no more? Tons of these things complaining. But there's a dynamic shift in verse 10, and it's really, here's the cure outlined specifically in verse 12. And it says, I will meditate upon all your works, but I will meditate upon all your works and consider all your mighty deeds. That's the remedy. That's the cure. And it makes sense, doesn't it? My mind is a constant battlefield. You want to call it a battlefield? It's a dang war zone. Battles going on in each section, the hippocampus, and I don't know what all of them are, but I just feel like there's like a little one over here. I digress. But it is a war zone. But the remedy to the depression in my brain is remembering, recalling what he's done. And that reminds us, going back to Psalm 75, that he's in control. Right? Okay. I'm going to finish up with verse 19, which is this. I'm going to read first the amplified version, and then it confused me out of no get out. So of course, I had to do a little bit of research, and I'll share that with you. In the amplified version, verse 19 says, your way in delivering your people was through the sea, and your paths through the great waters. Yet your footsteps were not traceable, but were obliterated. And that kind of scared me. I'm like, wait a minute, I can't see his footsteps. So here's what the message said about the footsteps. You walked right beside us, leading us, but nobody saw you coming back. Right? I love that. Because that for me means like maybe they, number one, didn't give credit to him. But for me, what's really a preference there is they weren't present. They were only looking at the water towers and the fire behind them and the enemies behind them. They were only looking at everything that was out of their control. And they were not in the present moment seeing that God was there, leading them. And how many times, Erica, do you, and I know I do, we talk about it all the time, I focus on things that scare me. I focus on this, anxiety, fear of future things that you can't control. Yep. All about that. But if I'm present, and now it is a commitment. Remember, it's a choice. It's a choice to jump into his arms if you want to be carried day by day. You have to jump, right? It's a choice. And beloveds, for me, this is going to have to be an every minute choice for a while. And maybe the rest of my life. Know thyself. I got anxiety. The ER, my easy to read version, called it, but you left no footprint. And then the Passion Translation said, with footprints on a pathway no one even knew were there. That's my husband calling. I think I'm for lunch. All right, with it, you never even knew it. So I want to go to the first part of that verse, and then we'll round out. The first part of that verse, and this is God speaking to me because I don't have any of this. I don't know. Your way in delivering your people was through the sea, and your paths through the great waters. And immediately God grabbed my heart this morning as I read that. And he said, I didn't say your path was going to be easy. Right? I mean, really, God can do anything. So go back to the Red Sea. If he wanted to, he could pick them up on a cloud and they would ride like Care Bears, all lovey and happy, over to the other side. He could have done that. He could have had a boat right there. Them all up, charged them over, you're done. He parted the sea. Fear everywhere. But I think there's such importance there. There's fear on this side. There's fear on this side. There's uncertainty to even where the freak you're going. And then you got your enemies behind you. So he demonstrated, yeah. But in that moment, you need to acknowledge me and put your faith in that. And I'm going to openly admit that's hard, but free. It's your only freedom, right? And so the last part, like I said, about those footsteps is it's also just one of God's greatest mysteries is how he works secretly in, with, and through us. Beloveds, if we were supposed to see that play card, we'd know the plays. And we in our sinful nature would, let's say he's offense for us, if we knew the play before he played it, we would obviously set up our defense against it in our sinful nature. So he, all knowing, doesn't have, no, he's got the play card. He's got the ultimate play card. We're never going to know. No, we're never going to know. But how glorious is that? Stop looking. Stop wasting your time being anxious and complaining and why did I lose this? Trust that he's got it, right? One of the things I have to say in my head all the time, God's got this, God's got this. They were wheeling me into them. I was probably very doped up. God's got this, God's got this, and that, I mean, it's true. Maybe we should get a little wristband and say GGT, God's got this. Might go better than WJD. Who knows? I'm going to round out with just a little note that came to me. God's miraculous ways are incomprehensible. We just spoke about that. Simply meaning that we have to have unwavering, and I put in there blind trust because it is blind. I know many of us have done something like this before. We're blindfolded, and then people ask us to either walk to my voice or something you might have done at work to know people. It was weird. But you know what it's like to cover your eyes and someone say, walk towards my voice, right? But this is true blind trust, where we're not going, don't trust you, because I always look through my blindfold because it scared the crap out of me if I didn't trust the person who was guiding me. It is true blind trust. No peeking. No peeking. And we have to follow his path, right? And again, I go back to what he laid on my heart. He led them through the sea, not care bearing it over on a cloud, not having wine on a boat cruise and enjoying it with all the food buffet. But he made them go through. Beloveds, if you feel like your path or what you're going through right now is tough, he knows that. But you have to have that blind trust. No peeking. Right? All right. Let's finish up in a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for just your word again, and my beloved friend who is here and just always makes me grow in my faith. Even today, she's already called me out on some things, which just is because she loves me. And it's the same that you do to me, Lord. If I get out of my own way and listen, God, I pray for every person watching this, and even if it's just one soul, that it helps them grow in their walk. God, I pray for every billions of people who are not watching this and may never watch this because they need you more than ever. I do too. And I pray that you just continue to let my broken, nasty, messy vessel use this to reach others, because this is not me. Goodness knows I have no wisdom. It's your wisdom. Please, God, help it reach the many that need to turn to you in these times. Love you. I love you. Erica loves you. I'll speak for you. And tomorrow, Saturday, we gonna get our movie on now. Love you.